I mean, they should put some pressure on her to grow her eyebrows back out.
Oof.
She's
True.
hard to look at.
Yeah, but have you seen her in real life? Have you seen her in real life?
And not an attractive woman.
That's Meryl Streep's daughter? Oh, no, I disagree. I think she's, in an odd way, I think, very interesting.
That's how you tell them, too.
Welcome back to Shat on TV, True Detective, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series, True Detective. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And the King B.
I'm the snarky one.
And this is our deep dive episode where we look back on this week's episode of True Detective and provide our thoughts and analysis, plus the top listener emails from the week. This week's episode was entitled The Hour and the Day. Guys, what'd you think?
So I liked it. I think you can tell when True Detective is really working well. Like this episode, it was an hour and 7 minutes. It was largely a transitional episode. A lot of the leads didn't pan out, and a lot of the character development was left unresolved. But still, that hour and 7, for me, it just breezed by.
I mean, I'll agree with you. It kind of flew by, but it really left me wanting more. This and the last episode just don't seem to be as great as the sum of their parts. You know, looking back and over your guys' notes and kind of refreshing my mind on the scenes that we watched, I go, oh yeah, that was a great performance. And oh, that was a really cool moment. But at the end of the episodes, I'm just kind of left wondering, is that all? Like, I continually want more and I'm just not feeling it.
Yeah, I was listening recently to the Dana Buckler show when they were covering RoboCop, and one of the points that Dana and Ashley brought up was that there's no wasted scenes in RoboCop. Like, every scene in RoboCop is doing something. It's an hour and 40 minutes, but it's such a big movie in the fact that it gets so much done and it's so memorable. And I agree with you, B, that it felt like some episodes of this season, or at least some parts of those episodes, do feel a little bit like filler, and they just kind of have some unresolved parts.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that the payoff is not going to meet up with the hype.
I think the blocking is one of the weaknesses of this season so far. When you look at the 4 episodes, there's some parts that I would have shifted around. This episode was much longer than some of the earlier ones. I think it has to do more with editing than the story, but we're not going to know until we have all 10 episodes out. But this one seemed a little denser, but maybe the parts were a little less important.
Yeah, with 2 points of reference, if you point to earlier in the season, episodes 1 and 2 really felt like a movie that just kind of went together, right? And it was very, very cohesive, very smooth. And then also looking back at season 1, which of course is kind of the pinnacle of this show, I felt like all of those were just, you were just mainlining good story, and you didn't even think about the fact that you're watching a show. I think that we've become conscious of that now. But David Milch, who co-wrote this episode, really, really made a difference in the sense that although the show slowed down a bit, maybe this is what you're talking about, Big D, the show slows down a little bit. It's a little bit longer, but it's got a lot of quality writing to it that makes it very, very interesting. So although not a lot happened on screen, you get some really, really interesting dialogue, very quotable. The only thing that I was kind of sad about was that they skipped the sex scene. Like, this is HBO. Like, I wanted to see on-screen sex, and they've really sanitized the show.
Without the performances by Mahershala Ali or Stephen Dorff, if you had lesser actors, there's no way that we're considering this show the quality it is right now. They carry the material.
So you're saying Vince Vaughn and Colin Farrell not doing this?
No. I think maybe if let's flip them. Let's put Mahershala and Stephen in that season. We might have something there.
No, this still be a shit show.
That's true. It would be.
All right. So This episode wasn't an entire waste. We don't mean to say that nothing happened here, because there were some massive revelations, some big clues dropped, and some questions answered.
Yeah. So we get some final information about some of the pieces over the 3 timelines. We find out the whereabouts of, cousin Danny O'Brien, Lucy's cousin. In the 2015 timeline, we find out that during the 1990s, Dan went missing. He then resurfaces, but then somewhere between 1990 and 2015, his remains are discovered at the bottom of a drained quarry in Missouri. You don't generally end up at the bottom of a quarry unless somebody wants you there or puts you there.
I like that you turned Dan O'Brien into some member of Riverdance. Oh, Danny O'Brien. But no, I agree that they brought this guy back, and they actually brought several characters back in on this episode that kind of had shifted out of frame. You also had the Attorney General, who was a prosecutor in the 80s time frame. So I was glad they did the callback to Dan O'Brien. Obviously, something went squirrely there. If this show wants to give us the payoff that it's building toward, this has to be some sort of a complex web that none of us has been able to figure out. And I hope it's not just some simple thing and they leave this strand just, unchecked.
Well, I think it's going to be easy to connect the death of Lucy and her cousin Dan. I'd like to go back and kind of put together how close together they both passed. Like you said, a guy doesn't just end up at the bottom of the quarry doing good deeds. And his wife's passing, especially her behavior in this episode, there's something going on.
Well, yeah, but Dan dies after 1990 and Lucy's body is found in 1988. So there's at least a couple of years between.
Maybe they're just checking off a list and it's a long, long list.
Somewhere Steve Buscemi is just applying lipstick.
What's the song that's playing when that scene goes on?
Everybody hurts.
No, it's not that. That's a good one.
I have no idea. But another big revelation here is I think we finally find out who is convicted, or at least I think it is. Dumbass Freddie Burns from the VW crew. His fingerprints are on Will's bike. And in a town like this where everybody's on edge, they're looking for somebody to convict. And Freddie Burns might be that guy. They bring him and his two buddies down for the interrogation. He admits that, they threw the kids off the bike. They played around with them, and they bent up the front wheel. He then, chased Will into the woods, and then threw his bike into the marsh, which is believable. And this does, give some background to the scene that we saw in episode 1, where the three of them are at the base of the tower, and they're banging around one of the bikes. So now we can confirm, at least by their testimony, that was Will's bike. And what he's saying is at least partially true. But other than Wayne, not all the police are believing his story about only chasing him into the woods.
So, I mean, can we all agree that poor Freddie Burns is the one that's taken the dive for this crime?
No, I don't think so necessarily. I mean, it seems that, Wayne is convinced that it's not him and he's ready to let him go. I mean, they're holding him in there, but they basically just because it was interrupted. I mean, he's the one they have the most evidence on, but none of the other clues are pointing toward this kid. It just seems, all you've got that relates it to is a bicycle.
No, we're saying as far as taking the fall, it's believable that his family in 1990 would want to fight to exonerate him or to reevaluate it. The only other candidate we had really thought of was the trash man and that his kids, but I don't know that he's walking out of that house.
Yeah, again, you got to remember that they say the kids want to reopen the case. If Freddie Burns is locked up in 1980 for this murder, how the hell does he have children they're trying to exonerate him in 1990?
Could it have been the other kids that were involved with him that day?
Yep.
And even though they're adults now, they're going to refer to them as kids because that's the timeline in which they meant them. I mean, here's the thing. I don't think any of us believes the trash man's coming out of that house alive. Like it's going to be a hairy start to episode 5 for sure.
No. Take a big fucking step back. Nobody wants to listen to you guys do conjecture about what could happen.
I think that's what everyone wants, actually.
I fucking don't.
Wow. Okay. So after that one, another one that we learn here is that we figure out who are getting an answer on. Well, this isn't conjecture, because we didn't actually see her do it, but we believe Patty Faber, the nice old racist lady at the local church seasonal fair, was the one who sold 10 Cornhusk dolls to a black man with a dead eye.
I don't really have any opinions on Patty Faber.
I don't really have any opinions on her either. I honestly think she's run her course in the show. If someone can write in and let us know, I couldn't find the actress's name. I think was in a more recent Coen Brothers movie playing the same lady.
Yeah, she's very much like one of those Law and Order interviews. I expected her to keep actually be making the dolls while the cops stop by, and then she doesn't have the time to stop making them in order to talk to them. But yeah, I think that Patty Faber thing is done. I think that scene was used to establish sort of the racist tones of this episode, which we'll get to a little bit later when we get into the watch letters. Yeah, I think that's a dead end. It did, though, lead us into one of the more interesting scenes, which I thought was a parallel of season 1, episode 4, which is a kind of a siege outside of a house, racially tinged. I know there was a direct homage, but I definitely felt that same degree of like panic in my stomach as I did during season 1, episode 4. I thought some serious shit was going to go down. And I think they will keep teasing us with that until we get something serious.
When it cuts to them in the car, one of the lines of dialogue is, well, that didn't really live up to expectation. And I go, well, yeah, fuck me too, I guess. Thanks a lot, Pizzolatto. It was a good scene and it was exciting, but it definitely, I think, there was a wink and a nod to your expectations there.
Yeah, I think there's also a misdirect. There's he gets hit in the back with like a rock or a tomato or something, whatever it is.
A tomato?
Well, I don't know what, because it exploded. It didn't. It was like a mud ball.
Get out of here, you cop.
What do you think he hit him with?
It was a dirt clod.
Okay, so a dirt clod. In the trailer for this episode that was played at the end of last, they edited it to make it look like it's a gunshot. So I was like, oh shit, it's going to go down in this part of town. But it wasn't. It was just a mud clod, or it could be a tomato. But in that scene that we finally do get, where we get the action, the shootout, which is alluded to for next episode, I think we get the answer as to why Roland is limping around in the 1990 timeline, and that the reference he makes at the VW or the VFW when they're having a drink about being the cop who got shot. I believe that Roland is now clearly going to be injured in this melee.
It could have been the dirt clod. That thing could have hit him real hard.
Yeah, and that was also brought up by one of our listeners in an email, Rob H. He caught that as well. It's real subtle. It's the first time that we've seen Roland walking around, and it's a pronounced limp. Just one last thing that I caught. Did you guys, in the flashback or the vision that he's having in 2015, when he's visited, which seems to be like his victims, people that he has killed, and it's a large assortment of Viet Cong soldiers. Did you notice that there's one inconspicuous white male in a suit with his head down in the middle of them?
Inconspicuous? They practically had a spotlight on that guy.
Well, he was kind of hiding back there. He's had his head down. It wasn't like he was like looking at us like, hey, waving.
I did like when he turned around to ask them if they still made Lincoln Mercuries, to kind of notate that, like, these guys are familiar to him. They're around all the time. He's no longer bothered by them. He's looking for them for help with his grocery list.
All right. So lots revealed to us, a little bit of conjecture, but we really want to get into the watch on this episode. We split out last week between our regular deep dive and the watch. So emails and tweets from the listeners. We had so many this week and they really, really drive the conversation. So we want to get straight to them without further ado. And the first one comes from listener Mitch. And he writes, hosts, Amelia absolutely, positively went over to the Purcell house, not as a teacher, but as a busybody investigator. So let's right away dispense with the notion that she was coming over just to drop off some personal items of the children out of the goodness of her heart. I don't buy it, and hopefully you don't either. She used the arts and crafts as a foray into the house and luckily stumbled across Lucy chugging Carlo Rossi. The biggest reveal in the entire discussion between the two has to be, of course, when Lucy breaks down mid-conversation, dreadful about what she has done, praying to God for help, and then she says, quote, children should laugh, as she describes the wretched state of the home and laments that she has, quote, the soul of a whore. That she uses the exact same phrase as the anonymous note sent to the Purcell home definitely is more than a coincidence, given her overwhelming guilt that seems to stem from being more than just a bad mother. Lucy knows something. Lucy has done or not done something of importance. What that is, I'm sure we'll see next week. Also, I'm really suspicious of that priest. Seems to me he wants Hayes' confession not to alleviate him of the burden of carrying his sins around. I think the priest wants to know what's going on in his mind, praying that he will get a glimpse in the investigation. For what reason? I'm not yet sure. He's very quick to assert that his congregation doesn't possess a murderer or a child abductor, but more than happy to have them fingerprinted. So which is it? I don't know. But the guy just rubs me the wrong way. Not saying he's guilty, but... And finally, I can't wait for the showdown between Brett and the MAGA dads. Brett is ready to go down, but not without one hell of a fight, which he absolutely lured them into. Good for him. Thanks for everything and keep up the great work, Mitch.
So this isn't the first time that Amelia's been out there playing detective on her own. I don't believe that Wayne put her up to this one. She's definitely not going under there like, Mitch said, to deliver some of the kids' personal belongings. She's got to be doing this investigating for herself, or like some of our writers later on come into, feeling out what she knows in order to maybe protect someone else who's involved?
I think that Amelia may just be the current obsession with serial killers and people who feel compelled to insert themselves into these crimes. This is a fun game for her, and she's just dying to know more.
See, I think Lucy is onto her, but for the wrong reason. So Lucy kind of says, oh, to Amelia, you're trying to use me to get in good with your cop boyfriend, trying to get me to say something to pin it on me. I don't think that's the case at all. I think what Amelia is doing there, she's telling Lucy to talk to Wayne so that Lucy will say anything that sounds suspicious or stupid. If you're a detective and you hear Lucy say that same thing to you, she becomes a suspect. And I think that's exactly what Amelia wants. She wants to pin this on Lucy. It's possible that she is just trying to lend a helping hand, and this is a huge misdirect by the show. But there's so many avenues now that are pointing in that direction that either it is an intentional misdirect or something's really going on there.
See, I want to focus more on Lucy. Lucy, yes, you're right. She seems guilty. Everything she's saying, I'm terrible, the things I've done. If you were doing this in a police station, they would just, wrap it up, get out the paperwork. You've confessed. But I don't believe she's confessed. And I think it's just a misdirect by the show. Lucy has done things that have led her kids into the situation that they are. One of them is dead. One of them is missing. And she feels guilty for the things she's done that's led them there. So I don't want to guess again, but it's not that she went out there and she killed them or she put them into it could just very well be the home, that the home wasn't the place that kids should laugh. And I find it odd, the parroting of that line, kids should laugh. And this house wasn't a place that had laughter. I don't think she's referring to the note itself. It's almost as if she's heard it before. And the thing I talked to King B about, and it's a bit of a stretch, is that I could see in the end that she was trying to do something that would better her daughter. Maybe it was an opportunity for her to go somewhere that could be a better place for her to grow up. And that now that they've gone there and it's gone so wrong, she's thinking, how could I have done that? How could I have put my daughter in that situation?
I mean, if she is involved somehow in this whole kerfuffle, as it were, then I would say it's not so much to put her daughter in a better situation, but rather to take the pressure off her. Clearly, she's not totally invested previous to this in being a great mom. She wants to live for herself, go out drinking, get laid. So she's going to feel guilt. But I would think that if she was involved, again, it's more for her interest and relief than, concern over her kids.
It's like the Casey Anthony effect.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty legit.
Thanks, Mitch, for your letter. Next up, we have Kenny Dukeman. And Kenny writes in, I love the characters in this show. There are a couple of moments where the dialogue is fantastic and creates a dynamic between two characters that is working well. So much so that they can just let the dialogue marinate and allow the viewers to read between the lines. Roland and Wayne play off each other really well, and both actors are in sync with each other. Both characters are likable, but have gray areas where they come off as bad. The strength of this show is the characters in the dialogue, I believe. I wish they would explore the female characters more, especially Amelia, as it's her that is the most understood in my mind. I think they're missing an opportunity to develop more of a connection with her to the viewers, and if they had that connection, it would make whatever ending she has have a bigger impact as a whole. A good amount of scenes are likely to end up as dead ends or filler, and instead of using filler scenes to keep us guessing at the mystery, I prefer to have more background on the characters, other than Wayne. Small gripe, but something I think that is missing in a good show. As a quick note, it seems as if the theme in True Detective is females aren't main characters, but supporting characters standing behind the male cast, and Amelia has the potential to be so much more than that. Also, Kenny wrote a lot more, as did most of these authors, so please go to shatontv.com to see these emails in their full entirety. These are just short snippets that we have truncated for time.
Now, I know the listeners aren't here for our conjecture, but I think you're going to get what you want, maybe just not in the form that you expect. I've got the suspicion that just the way she's acting, that Amelia's really up to something a lot deeper than we're on to. One of the first things she says when we meet her is that she's a big fan of going off to another place and pretending to be an entire person entirely. We don't know that she's not doing that here. It's possible we still don't know really who she is. She's got this fascination with this crime, and she's really done a lot to insert herself in it. And maybe this is just another game for her. I'm really interested in seeing her final form.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that Amelia says to Wayne during dinner in the 1980s, she says, "I used to be a bit of a mess." And he kind of calls her out and says, like, yeah, that's not really surprising to me. It's the least surprising thing you've told me. In my experience, every woman that I've ever met that said she used to be a bit of a mess is still a huge fucking mess.
Yeah, I don't think the vagueness of her character is unintentional. I think she's a bit of a chameleon. We don't know who she is because we're Wayne. Wayne doesn't know who his wife is, and when he's starting to have the memory degradation later on. I can't remember your mother's face. I don't think he truly knows who she is, and it's not due to lack of development. It's that she is hiding those facts from us, the viewers, as she's hiding them from Wayne. And there's going to be a dark past that, she tries to say, I fell in with some bad people, did some bad things, and asked, did you ever look me up in the police database? I think we're going to find that she's not this background character, that the entire time she's like Wayne says, it's staring you right in the face. It's obvious. At the end, we're going to say, how the fuck did we miss it? She was right there.
Yeah, I think one of the things Kenny's pointing out, though, and I agree with him, is that even though Amelia can be revealed at different layers, even though we can kind of peel away that facade and get to some sort of deep, dark secret, none of the story is told from her perspective. And it hasn't been in any season of True Detective. And I think that's kind of the gripe there, is that when you see these arguments between Wayne and Amelia, it's still kind of seen from Wayne's perspective of the way it went. Now, granted, she's dead, so that might have something to do with it. It might be his recollection of the situation. But I find myself really stressed out by these scenes. I almost like fast forward through it just because I realize about myself that if I'm in these sort of domestic situations where there's that degree of argument, I just want to get the hell out. And I don't know, like, Big D, is this a normal married couple's gripe, or is this something way beyond those bounds?
No, I don't think there's anything normal about this. And I find it odd that she always uses sex at the most inopportune, inappropriate time.
God bless her.
To diffuse or divert Wayne's attention. When they're in the parking lot on the stakeout, and you can see she's uncomfortable for some reason. She doesn't want him there. She doesn't want him to find Julie. Hey, couldn't we be spending the whole night at the hotel having sex? Then in this scene where he's hit a point where he's going to do something, well, what are you going to do? She's expecting him to say he's going to hit her, and she's like, I'll cry. The kids are 5 feet away. I'll tell you one thing as a parent. You're not going to have audible sex, banging the dresser into the wall while your kids are 3 feet away. At least my wife and I wouldn't. She uses it at a time to almost just deflect, and it seems odd. Maybe other people do it, but not me.
For anybody who hasn't seen Big D in person or picture Big D, all of his sex is audible. You could be fucking in Florida right now. We'd hear it in Arizona.
Oh.
Emma is well aware of what you're doing in there.
In a clear night in the Arizona desert, if you listen closely to the west, to the east, it's where Florida is.
You can hear the howls.
All right. Thanks, Kenny, for your email. Next up, we have one from Ash Schlafly of the Dana Buckler Show. And she writes, it became clear in episode 1 that race would be an underlying theme this season, as I talked about in my initial email, and you all have discussed before. What was so brilliant about the first 2 episodes is how subtle these references were. We had that great moment between Wayne and Roland in the car in the first 2, where we knew in that moment that they both realized that Wayne would always be recognized as less than because he wasn't part of the white majority on the force. The same can be said of the way Amelia has handled her standing in such a predominantly white community, or at least has been portrayed as predominantly white. The way the showrunners and even the director of the first 2 episodes approached these issues was subtle, coded, effective in its approach. Then we have this episode. So meaning episode 4. There's terrible use of the term pickaninny. Then Tom Purcell says the N-word. There is a moment in the car between Wayne and Roland about the irate Negroes, and there is the uncomfortable laughter between the two. We literally move from hints to full-on slap-in-your-face racism. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't see the racism. I'm not saying we shouldn't have to deal with it as an audience, or that our characters shouldn't have to deal with it in the show. In fact, I believe quite the opposite. I think it would be horribly short-sighted and whitewashed to present a show about African-American cop in the 1980s and 1990s in a seemingly majority white community without addressing race. But the issue I have is twofold. 1, the show did not earn the switch from subtle to full-on in-the-face racism. It's too dramatic of a switch. It seems clunky to craft a script that changes things from subtle undertones and racism ingrained in social cycles and authoritarian power relationships to full-on obvious racial slurs. I'm fine with showing us that ugly side and those terrible words and the power they yield. But this brings me to my second problem. If we're going to have such overt racism, we have to deal with it. When it is subtle, the discussion doesn't need to be had because it's implied that characters and we all recognize it. But part of the subtlety is that we don't directly address it. The same can't be true of such overt overtones and slurs. It has to be dealt with. It can't just be another scene. It's a lost opportunity to explore the effects of such racism on Wayne, his career, the career's end, and Roland's ascension. There is so much left on the table. The resentment Wayne must feel toward Roland, for starters. Instead, we get cut to another scene. I think overall, it's a failure of Pizzolatto as a showrunner and mostly as a writer. He has had problems in the past dealing with subtlety like this. More so, though, he has trouble connecting points. Think about season 1. We're all obsessed with the Yellow King, obsessed about occult mentions, and in the end, a lot of us were let down by the ending. Let down by what turned to be a mundane solution to a crazy journey, where the journey is what is remembered fondly rather than kind of a clunky ending.
Well, nobody really likes the flight home from a vacation. But there's a lot to unpack in that email. I would say that, the show's only an hour long. The issue of race does seem to come up a lot in the show. And it's always coming down to Roland saying, hey, I understand that you want it to be about this, but it's not. It's about you and me. And the way you see things may not 100% have to be the way it is.
I think that the show did earn the shifting gears, and they did it in the plot. So basically, you have these guys go out to another town where it is predominantly minority, and you get the other side of the coin. And in that situation, a very tense situation, we can't overlook that whole situation. That changes the tone of things. It makes things overtly racist because you just went across the border, so to speak. I mean, literally. Although Roland is not a racist in the classic sense of the word, there's a difference between plain racism and systemic racism, right? And I think that the two cops are seeing it from two different sides, right? So the way that Wayne is looking at it is that there is a system that is set up in which I am always going to be lesser than. And the way Roland's looking at it is like, hey, dude, I am not racist, toward you. But what's interesting is the way that dynamic plays out in that standoff at the trailer park, which is I feel like Wayne is very much aware of race in that scenario. And Roland is just trying to play it off like any other situation, right? And I do believe that if he was in a white community in the same situation, he's probably much more likely to cap somebody.
Or at least bust some heads.
So I had heard that when Mahershala and Nick met to discuss the roles, that the characters were originally reversed, that the lead was white and the secondary partner was black. Mahershala revealed to BlacKkKlansman's John David Washington in an interview for Variety's Actors on Actors series that when he first met, he had to convince him to reverse the roles. The white detective was the lead actor, and the black cop was going to be the secondary, which would have been the Roland character. He convinced him to flip the script, and I wonder if in that change, some of these unnatural scenes to inject race were put in, because the conversations in the car, it doesn't seem like a natural conversation. And I'm not talking about whether or not it's right or wrong. It just didn't feel like something the partners would have said, or it seems like they're just trying to maybe adjust the script on the fly.
One other point that Ashley makes, Big D, is that she's talking about the fact that this is a white director and a white showrunner and a white writing staff writing about race issues. And that's a really, really tough thing to do accurately, right? I mean, if you ask me right now, like, hey, write a story about, an Asian family and make that screenplay accurate. But also we're going to talk about their relation to race in 1980s America. I'd be like, no, thank you. Like, I am not qualified for this. And so there is a degree, and as much as I hate to say it, we are still in an era where I can tell if a film about black people is made by a black director or a white director. It is glaringly obvious.
But Mahershala also had some input into it. He dug into his own his family photo album. His grandfather was a real-life state police officer. So Mahershala did have some input in it. So maybe it was from that translation of experience.
Yeah, his input was, I'm going to be the star. Nobody's saying any racist shit to me.
Your current script sounds like a Lone Ranger Tonto load of bullshit. Not interested. Next.
Sounds just like Mahershala Ali. I could see him saying that.
Don't be so snarky, King B. Don't be so snarky.
Oh, I'm the snarky one.
And for fuck's sake, I'm not getting naked. I don't care if it's HBO. All right. Thanks, Ashley, for your email. There's also another one from Ashley that we did not have time to read this week. So please go to Shat on TV.com and check out all the good work she's doing. She is writing essays, grad level essays for sure. Maybe even doctoral. Next up, we have an actually from listener Lauren J, who writes in, actually, it was Hoyt's granddaughter that died, not his daughter. Their picture is hanging in the office. So that was my bad. Actually, I'll take responsibility for that one. So kind of calling it back. So Hoyt Foods, they have a foundation to help take care of children. Usually it's for like medical stuff like this. And in this case, it's for they're trying to help out with this abduction case. But I said that it was Hoyt's daughter that died. It's actually his granddaughter. So good catch, Lauren. And now that brings us to our tinfoil section of the watch. So strap on your caps, gentlemen. This first one is from Hamish in Australia, who writes in, gentlemen, I love the show. A theory popped into my head this week. It's crazy, but here it is for your perusal. It looks to me like Purple Haze, who had access to a brown sedan and cop car, was doinking the Purcell kid's mother, I'm entitled to a life, in the bushes. And the don't you need a warrant guy said he saw a biracial couple. The Purcell kids stumbled across their mom out looking for Dick, and things got out of hand. Hayes chased and perhaps accidentally killed the boy without knowing who he was, and the mother posed him like his communion picture when she saw what had happened. Then the girl, meaning Julie, was sent to live with the creepy cousin. Hayes did the crime, but has either blanked it from his mind, PTSD from Vietnam, or is feigning Alzheimer's. I hope it's not true, but it feels like a possibility to me right now. Best regards, your fan from Australia, Hamish.
This is if
doinking.
This is if AMC was producing this show. This is the plot for AMC's True Detective season 3.
I think this is more of a Sci-Fi Network, Z Nation True Detective spinoff. I'd like to hear an Australian say the word doinking, though. I think that'd be pretty interesting. If you could send that to us in a voicemail, that'd be great.
I also like that, like in all this madness, Hamish also included that the mother posted him like his communion picture when she saw what had happened, because that explains it. Like, oh, I was fucking this cop and my kid got killed.
In the bushes.
In the bushes. Communion photo time.
Hamish, I think you've been watching those toilets drain in the opposite direction too long. It scrambled your brain, bro.
Anyway, credit, though, to Hamish for the first crazy tinfoil of the year, I believe. So way to go. We have another piece of tinfoil coming from Mark S., who had the audacity to label this a True Detective theory. He says, what's up, guys and gals? Mark from Pennsylvania here. Just a quick thought. Is it possible that the TV director, Lisa, is a grown-up Julie Purcell? Kind of out there, but it could be a big twist in the show. Thanks for reading, and I'm really enjoying the podcast episode so far. Thanks, Mark S.
Well, no. Just no. Well, I mean, we're kind of shown that it's not that, because we know that in 1990, Wayne gets a good peek at Julie.
Yeah, but keep in mind, he's seeing the Viet Cong in his den. Okay, so we can't trust what he's seeing. But if it is her, you know what? She's been really well adjusted. She's had some healing. She's gone to therapy. She's in a pretty good place now. So I'd be okay with that.
She also looks really good for like a 45-year-old.
When I was teaching at a jewelry studio, every now and then I'd meet a woman. What a woman. Team up with Hamish and write me a TV show.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Next up, we have another, actually regarding the West Memphis Three. This comes from Rosenblatt Kalman, who says, gentlemen, love all your shows. Gave you guys a great review, but actually, Big D, the West Memphis Three were never exonerated. They had to plead guilty to get a reduced sentence and get released on time served.
That is correct. That is correct. I meant to say that they were freed in an unorthodox manner. You are right. I was not clear. Good for you. Oh, I don't want to say good for you. I sound like a dick there. No, thank you for pointing that out.
You sound very snarky.
Oh, no, I'm pompous.
Oh, you're pompous. He's snarky.
Yes. But I'm not both.
So if you guys have no idea what we're talking about, on our iTunes review, which, by the way, please go write an iTunes review for us. That really helps the podcast grow. This week, we were trying to figure out which of the co-hosts was snarky and which one was pompous, according to a review written by a listener.
No, they said I was both.
Oh,
and that's impossible. I think they're confusing B's voice. I'm without a doubt. I've been called pompous before on the podcast. I'll wear that crown, but I'm not snarky. At least I don't think.
I'll take snarky.
I just like that I'm left out of the whole mix. So that's great. Thanks, Rosenblatt, for your correction. Next up, we have one from Dana. It's another tinfoil theory. Julie placed her brother's hands in prayer. She's the only one who would have seen the family photo. After he was killed accidentally in a plot they were both complicit in to get away from hectic home life and quarreling parents, perhaps running off to join their uncle. Here's the crazy part. Mahershala's daughter was taken or killed by the same party that has Julie. I love listening to you guys. Dana.
She's in California. She's still in contact with his son.
I mean, she could be in California the same way that the dog you had when a kid goes and lives on a farm now. We don't necessarily know. I don't believe that this theory is accurate, but I think that there is something nefarious that has happened with Mahershala's daughter at this point.
I think it's going to come down at the end that Will's was not a murder. It was an accident. And I wouldn't be surprised if we find at the end this is just a series of unfortunate accidents that overlap and appear to be something super nefarious.
Do you want it to be?
No, but I could see it going that way. You know, Will, they're out there playing. He falls down, hits his head. Kids freak out like they're known to do. They go position the body. Hey, we got these corn dolls that we're going to use for some of our playtime. Let's put that up there. Let's divert the attention. Then she's like, hey, you know what? I was going to leave anyway for a better life. I'm going to go now. I put together some incorrect series of events in my personal life that had me convinced my neighbor had broken my irrigation pipe in my backyard and caused flooding. But in the end, it was just a series of unfortunately timed accidents that just pointed in one direction. I think in the end, we could find that this is just all about memory and how we're not reliable and how things can seem so certain, but in the end, they're subjective and sometimes wrong.
I mean, I'm pretty sure in this episode that detectives have said it was likely an accident. He was looking out or trying to protect his sister, and this is what happened. So the sister may have been there, and she may have placed his hands in that fashion just because she was trying to take care of him or she felt guilty for what was happening. And whoever the adults are with her at the time probably say, you're going to be in trouble. It's better if you come with us.
Thanks, Dana, for your prediction. Next up, we have one from Dante Webb. And Dante writes, hey guys, really enjoying your analysis so far. I wanted to provide some context to one of the things you brought up in this episode. I work as a forensic biologist, and when Wayne picked up the dice in the woods, this is in episode 3, with his handkerchief and without gloves or anything like that, that to me was an accurate portrayal for the time period of how detectives would handle evidence that we now know is incorrect. DNA evidence consideration, which in turn improved all evidence handling considerations in the U.S., didn't really become a thing until the 90s. In fact, it wasn't until 1985 when Sir Alec Jeffreys came up with what's known as DNA fingerprinting. The knowledge just wasn't there yet. Hell, it's still an issue today. Anyway, thanks for the content. Excited for episode 4, Dante Webb.
You know, I appreciate the professional perspective, and it's got to be frightening. You wonder how many people are sitting in jail right now that are actually innocent just due to shoddy police work, or not even shoddy police work. They thought they were doing the right thing, and cross-contamination and putting evidence together. It must have been a dark time, for justice.
We see in several instances, whenever they get anywhere to talk to a new lead or anything else, they're just going with fingerprints, right? That's basically like their most valuable tool at this time. And of course, like intuition, but there's a lot of like guts-based detective work here. I mean, how many times do we see Mahershala Ali or Wayne just say, yeah, it's not this guy. And everyone's like, oh, okay, cool. It seems all right. And what even happened with the guy that they pulled over in Davis Junction? They pulled out of his house, the one-eyed guy. Like, did they ever resolve what happened? They just left?
Yeah, we never really find out. I would assume they were taking him to the station for questioning, but when it cuts to the car, he's not there.
Or it's just not every lead is going to lead somewhere. Then he makes a valid point. He says, there's a lot of people around here missing fingers or with dead eyes. Maybe this is one of those towns. But as far as the fingerprint goes, one of the other things we missed from Revelations was in the 1990 timeline when they're back on the case and they get their hands on the Walgreens security footage, that he sees what he believes is Julie leaving the fingerprints on the aisles. And she seems to be almost running from somebody, or did it just seem hectic? Is there a chance here that maybe she was running into that Walgreens for some, protection or to get away from something?
it almost seemed to me like she was like high or something. Like she was kind of like weaving through the, through the aisle there. But definitely did not look like a person like casually shopping, for some earplugs.
No, she's either being pursued or she knows that she's on camera, the way she looks up at the camera and realizes she's not happy to be in the place and time where she's at.
Yeah, this might have been her proof of life. That she's caught on camera. She went in there knowing that Walgreens would probably have security cameras.
Yeah, because in 2015, she still hasn't been found. So whatever happens in 1990, it is not rescuing Julie. I don't think that's the story we're going to get. Thanks, Dante, for your expert email. And finally, we have an email from Brian Z, who writes in, how about the mom? Hi, guys, and Carrie. Carrie?
I'm the snarky one.
I don't think I've heard you or any other fan theories on the podcast mention any suspicions on the missing and dead kid's mom, Mrs. Purcell. There's some shady business going on, namely how she was looking at the detectives when they came back for that second room search. The bag they found, where she used to work, could be another clue to her involvement. But I had my feeling of distrust long before that. In the real world, we often hear how mothers hurt or kill their own children, either because they are crazy, are involved with some crazy boyfriend, or both. I would not be at all surprised if she's in on the kidnapping, which maybe went too far. She could have posed her son in his first communion pose to remember his innocence one last time. I've been a listener of all the Shat podcasts over the years, so many thanks to you for your time and dedication. That comes from Brian Z. So, Brian, I think one of the other facts that we learned in this episode is that Mrs. Purcell was banging her boss, not necessarily Wayne, but definitely her boss. And so it does bring in, as King B has alluded to before, sort of this class struggle thing again, where it might be, or it might be an attempt to make a better life for her children. She's fucking her boss. I don't think there's really any indication that she's trying to get anywhere with the sex, but it could be a thing. We see the attorney general come in this episode again and start putting pressure on the cops again. He's kind of being a little disrespectful toward Wayne. And I think that angle of things, when we keep talking about these little incidents where it was maybe a misunderstanding here, an accident there, we're disregarding the fact that in every season so far, True Detective has had that slant of the wealthy or the powerful having some involvement in this. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's still the case.
But all of Lucy's flaws are sexual and promiscuous in nature. It's the way she lived her life, that she had whore eyes. There's no violence. I can't believe that she was somehow having her daughter out, selling her off for prostitution. Unfortunately, that happens today. Parents will sell their kids off to meet a drug habit. I don't know that we have proof of a drug habit other than the overdose later on. Her sexual promiscuity doesn't lead me to think that she would intentionally harm or allow her daughter to be harmed.
I think it's a lot more that she's just an indifferent, uninvolved mother who simply doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want the job. And she looks for that sort of escapism and in, the idea that there's another life with another man. I mean, at the time, I would imagine that a woman didn't really feel empowered to pursue her own life. The only way she thought she could get what she wanted was, through the man that she was with. But I don't believe ultimately she's a suspect. I think a lot of this is just more of like the whodunit misdirect for you.
Okay, so I'm going to put on my tinfoil here for the first time. What if, she worked for Hoyt. Hoyt has the foundation. The granddaughter was lost. What if the foundation also tried to pair up parents who want kids with kids that are in situations that aren't that good? Somehow, Lucy has the option of giving the daughter up to a family that could improve her life. And that's where she gets that line, kids should be in a home that has laughter and full of joy. And she allows her daughter to go off with someone thinking it's going to be a better life. And when it goes south, that's when she's racked with guilt. And she didn't do it, only for the goodness of her heart to make Julie's life better. But what you said, King B, to free herself up to now she can go out. She can be the Casey Anthony. It would tie the Hoyt plot into it, because we agree that the Hoyt angle has not yet been completely vetted out.
My only, argument to that is that Lucy hasn't really shown herself to be a person of like depth and real substance that would be able to come to this decision. If she was in fact guilty of these things, I think she would have caved by now under scrutiny, because she's a fucking wreck. There's just not a lot to her.
But it's interesting that the cops have pressed on Tom. They didn't really press on Lucy as hard. So maybe we will get a scene, in the future where they come to put pressure on her, or especially if Amelia drives Wayne toward her.
I mean, they should put some pressure on her to grow her eyebrows back out.
Oof.
She's
True.
hard to look at.
Yeah, but have you seen her in real life?
And not an attractive woman.
That's Meryl Streep's daughter? Oh, no, I disagree. I think she's in an odd way. I think very interesting.
That's how you tell them too.
She in a non-conventional way, or a non-traditional beauty. But I think there's something about her when she's not made up to look like, this trailer park waitress banging, Mahershala in the bushes.
To the listeners at home, Big D will pen your Valentine for you for $5.
Yeah, Big D, smoother than Wayne Hayes at dinner. Thanks for all of your emails and tweets. Again, if you'd like to send us a message for The Watch, you can email us hosts@shatontv.com. And to read all of these in their entirety, plus some that didn't make it to the show, please go to shatontv.com and go to the True Detective section and go to The Watch. Big D, do we have some voicemails this week?
Yes, Gene, we did get 2 voicemails here. The first one comes from Jonathan, or Dr. J, as he likes to be called, down in Austin, Texas.
Hey, everybody. This is Dr. J down in Austin, Texas. Wanted to give you a couple of notes here. First of all, let me just say, love what you're doing. I am in love with your podcasts. I listen to them almost every day. It really enriches my life. I have a family. I have a business that I run, and I cannot imagine the amount of time y'all spend on this. So I really appreciate it. I love all you guys, Raj, Gene, Big D, Carrie, King B. Keep doing what you're doing, man. People really do appreciate it. I also want to hang out with King B at some point and have a beer. He seems like a really interesting dude. Okay, so I wanted to get into a couple of things. One, True Detective, listening to that, I think it was really fashionable for people to bag and just trash season 2. It wasn't as good. It's not great, but I don't think it's as bad as everyone says it is. I think it's not True Detective. I think it's something totally different, and that's what bothers me about it. The 2 main things that I think they got wrong was that abandonment of the Lovecraftian, ominous horror element that I'm glad to say is creeping back into season 3 with D&D and the little corn husk dolls and that kind of thing. But they just let that go, and that really took something away from me. The other one was the overly convoluted and complicated storyline. Yeah, it was really hard to follow that. But if you were able to, I do think that was still better television than a lot of what was out there. I dug the performances. Yeah, Vince Vaughn wasn't the right cast there, but it wasn't as horrible, I think, as people remember it being. So that's the first thing. Second thing, ripping through the Shat the Movies reviews, finally get to the real genius one. Had to tell Gene, I'm with you, buddy. I also jerked off to the Speed Racer Trixie moaning techno song. So you're not alone there, man.
Dirty.
Funnily enough, I actually tried to leave this exact message, but I dialed S-H-I-T instead of S-H-A-T. So this whole message, somebody in Yonkers, New York, got on their voicemail. So I laughed thinking about them hearing me. Again, thanks for doing what you're doing. If I had a suggestion for a Shat the Movies review, it would be maybe best of Tom Clancy. I know you at least got Hunt for Red October and Patriot Games. I don't know if, what other ones were in the 80s and 90s, but that would be something I'd be interested in. So thanks again. Love what you're doing. Keep it up.
Wow, Dr. J, I am flattered, and a review like that and a message like that really makes it worth all the hours that we put into it. So thank you so much for that. Also, gross. I can't believe you also jerked off the Speed Racer song. I must have played that tape 100 times a week.
Man, that was a great message.
What are you talking about?
Do you ever remember that there's that techno song, the Speed Racer one? Remember that techno remix?
No.
Oh, go, 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 go. That one?
Okay.
There's a part where it slows down. There's a breakdown. And then they took clips of Trixie where she's going, oh, speed. Uh-huh. Oh. And they play it and they're looping it and the beat's getting faster and faster. As a kid, I used to masturbate to that.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. So he was just saying, Dr. J did too. So I'm not alone.
That's interesting. My first crush was Rainbow Bright. I wanted to be her boyfriend.
But that's like wholesome. You're like Wayne. Like you need to have like dinner and stuff. You had to have this so you could have that with Rainbow Bright.
I guess so.
Okay, Jonathan, great message. We need to get you on the show. That was well thought out, well structured response. I'm impressed. King B, you're getting some love lately. That he wants to have some drinks with you? We need to start renting you out.
It only took me 38 years and having my voice broadcast across the world to finally meet someone that likes me.
Oh.
Yeah. You make a strong point. Season 2 isn't complete garbage, and maybe I'll sit down later and tweet out my favorite season 2 moments, because there are some that are in there. It just so happens that the vehicle of delivery for those moments was a shit show.
Jonathan, I like it. We're going to add Tom Clancy as a category. So I'll add it next week with the next batch that we put up for voting. So thanks again for the message.
Jonathan, I do want you to know that I gave season 2 of True Detective an honest chance. I actually, as a contrarian, really, really wanted to be like, you know what, guys, you're wrong. It's actually pretty good. But I agree with you that it has the problems that it has. Now, what's interesting about it, though, is that we saw season 1 of True Detective, and we saw that those Lovecraftian overtones and the creepiness of it and that horror of it. And then we, as an audience, decided that's what this show is. And that's not really fair to the creators of the show, right? Like maybe that's not what Pizzolatto had in mind at any point. He just had, this season was supposed to be creepy, and then the next season was going to be like a mob thing, and then the next season, he's going to try to do a different thing. Some hit and some didn't. And now we, as little brats, are saying, no, this is what the show is. Bring it back, or we revolt. We won't watch anymore.
I hope he gives us season 4 in outer space. Sorry. You guys can chase me on something.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Jonathan's going to call back and be like, no, I don't need to have that beer with King Bay.
Space Crimes Division.
So our final voicemail here comes from a listener who's put some thought into it. And Gene's a little worried that this one might be a bit too spot on.
Yeah, so we heard this one, and also Joe, who wrote it, also wrote into us the same thing via email. And it's a very, very well fleshed out theory, which ties together a lot of pieces. And we're not saying it's accurate, but if for some reason, this has happened before on previous shows, if for some reason this was a leak or some sort of inside information about what happens on the show, we just want to warn everybody listening that what we're about to discuss, or the voicemail we're about to play, could spoil the whole show for you. I think it's got some flaws, and we'll get to those. But if you don't want to have the show spoiled, if you don't even want the risk of it, we would encourage you to just not listen to the rest of the podcast. You won't get to hear our awesome sign off at the end, but that's okay. You're going to spare yourself a lot of grief. And if you do listen to it and this does end up being what happens, we don't want to hear about it.
Yeah. Come on, listen to it. Because it's not like it's spot on and it's likely to happen, because you were pissed off when King B even, latched onto this and said, hey, I like it. You were like, fuck no, I'll be pissed if this is how it ends.
I think what I like most about this voicemail, Joe's talent for world building and just mapping out a story on the fly was so intensely detailed and well-rounded. The guy really thought out where this is going to go, has an end point and a clear path on how to get there. And he puts it all together with so little input. I was just kind of in awe at listening to him rattle off all these details in what I think is a 3-minute voicemail. He gives us about another 6 hours worth of television.
With zero vocal inflection.
No, it is frightening. I think Joe might have somebody in his basement and he has some experience in the matters. But listen to it. Screw Gene. It's not going to spoil your season. I don't think he's nailed it on the head. But here is Joe from California.
Hey, guys. This is Joe in California, and I'm calling in regard to True Detective Season 3. I think I have a solution for the season. The solution is kind of simple and right in front of us. The kids were taken by Wayne's wife, Amelia. She was aware of the kids' neglect and abuse and decided to do something about it. Remember the scene at night when Wayne speaks to Amelia after the meeting at the community center. A white man in a brown car was waiting for her. Maybe the man who saw the kids with the black and white couple got the sexes mixed up. Or we just assumed it was a black man and a white woman. I didn't rewatch to make sure. But maybe it was a black woman and a white man in a brown car. Amelia was aware that the boy was a loner and picked on. Maybe she and her friend met with him to play D&D and talk about his problems. Maybe one day the sister goes along and is given the dolls. So they plan to take the kids away, and something goes wrong. Maybe the boy slips and falls, hits his head, and dies. So they have to leave quickly. And the sister is the one that makes them place the body the way they did, because it's what she remembers and had seen them do, seen them in the same pose at church. So eventually Wayne finds a clue left in the woods, something that points the finger directly at Amelia. He covers it up and says nothing because he loves her. Then maybe some people die because the investigation goes in the wrong direction. He has the guilt from the deaths. He knows Amelia did it, and maybe he thinks that the girl's in a better place. The guilt drives him to drink. Maybe he allows someone to be framed for the murder and kidnapping. He ends up marrying Amelia, and she writes a book that is completely false, but gains a lot of notoriety out of it, and he hates that. That's why he doesn't read the book. He quits being a detective because of all the guilt he feels. He starts to drink more. His home life gets bad. The scene at the Walmart where he freaks out is understandable because he's afraid that due to the worsening situation at home, his wife will take the kids from him. She's done it before. That's why he's angry when she meets with the cops and goes on investigating. He knows it's complete bullshit because he knows she's the one that took the kids. It's also why he told her about Julie being found. He wants her to come clean. She doesn't, and he feels more pain and guilt. He knows she's a liar. He gets upset when they reopen the case because he doesn't want them to find out that Amelia was involved. There are holes in the case because he created them. He misdirected the investigation and he's covered up a lot of evidence. In 2015, he's having problems because his dementia allowed him to forget what Amelia did. Maybe the interviewers suspect that he was the one who did the cover-up. Maybe they know that Amelia was involved. In 1990, he joins Roland's task force to continue to cover up and misdirect. Maybe Julie was given to some people and forgotten by Amelia. Maybe Wayne sees that her situation got worse. Maybe she ODs and dies. Wayne confronts Amelia. She responds in a callous, self-centered way. Altercation ensues. Maybe she slips and hits her head and dies like the boy did. Maybe his daughter sees it and can't forgive her dad. I think Wayne's haunted by Amelia because of this. His dementia is bad now, but he will rediscover his wife was the kidnapper in a backwards way like Memento, and that's the season in a nutshell.
Wow. Yeah.
I love it.
That's a lot of tinfoil.
Yeah. So first of all, we're gonna have to live in a world where there are a lot of banana peels just laying around randomly, people slipping and bonking their heads left and right and dying. I think this whole thing would have to be predicated on one possibility, and if this was the case, then I could see it being true, and that is that Amelia does not know that Wayne knows.
I mean, that would make a really interesting, aha moment in the show. As much as I do love this theory, I think we know that it's not accurate. I believe that the big cover up is going to take place in the 90s, not in 1980. So, in this moment, he's marrying Amelia, not knowing her involvement. Again, just the amount of information he gives us in that 3 minutes it's staggering. I really enjoyed it.
To try to dissect it, one problem, he said, the guilt leads him to drink. He drinks even before the case. His drinking habits is prevalent from their first date. But he says that Wayne intentionally covered it up to protect his wife. There's no way this man would do that. There's no way this man would. You're shaking your head at me, Gene. I don't think so. I think it's the other way around. Amelia has been injecting herself into this case from the very beginning. From the first time he walked into that classroom and asked her about the Purcell kids. She saw a way to get in. She's tired with her life in the small town. She wants to be a writer. Bingo, I've got a detective here I can manipulate to get on the inside of a case. What better way is there to write a crime novel than to see it from the inside? And when she gets in, she realizes she has some ability. She can manipulate him. She can manipulate the kids. The kids give up some information that is after she talks to them. She's in the interview room many times. She uses her skills of persuasion to get the cops to give up the videotape or information about the fingerprints. I don't think that he willingly protects her. She manipulates him the same way she did all along to point in a different direction at somebody else is guilt, when she's just trying to protect herself or trying to save her own skin, like she uses sex. So in the end, I think what they're going to find what they've done is they've gone after or protected or destroyed evidence that was because of something that she did. They realized they made a mistake and they were fooled. And that's why he can't read the book. Because I think they said at some point, he references that the book is more a story about their marriage, that he realizes in those pages of the book, that he was manipulated to the end conclusion that he comes up to that leads to a false conviction.
Wayne does mention that part of what he doesn't like about the book is that he's in it too much. He doesn't like that part of it. But let's not make the mistake of thinking that just because this guy has a code, that he is somehow heroic. When we look at what he's done and what he's committed himself to, he even says to Brett Woodard, the trash man, when they're talking, he says like basically that he just doesn't ask himself those questions, right? Why does he do what he does? Well, it's his job. How does he wear that badge?
It's got a little clip on it.
Exactly. It's not that he wants to be a hero or anything like that. He just does the job because he lends himself to it. I mean, he did recon and tracking in Vietnam. All he's doing now is a different form of that. If he finds an allegiance to something else, a person or a family ideal or something else, who's to say that he wouldn't be perfectly willing to be malleable when it comes to his ethics? I also found it interesting that when Roland and Wayne are talking to the detectives in 1990, when they're getting back on the case, you get the little task force together, Roland points out that, we made a mistake, and he's corrected by Wayne. Wayne was like, we? I don't know which way to think about that. Is he saying, no, I, Wayne, was not incorrect? Or is he saying, no, you, Roland, did not make a mistake. It was mine. It's an interesting dynamic, and I'm really curious about where that goes.
Well, I can't wait for episode 5 and the shootout that we're all been waiting for.
Yeah, you can't put a claymore in front of me and then not show me. That was
a real fuck you.
Yeah. And I think they were like, oh, you like episode 4,
you like
huh?
Episode 4?
Like those shootouts? I didn't like season 2, did you?
I just hope. Because in the trailer for the next episode, the hole that's in the side of that building, I've fired a claymore. I question the validity of that. This is an anti-personnel mine or, an explosive. It shoots off steel balls. At roughly, they'll go 100 meters. So that's believable, but it looks like it blew the side of the house out.
Pointer to everybody, if you haven't listened to Shat the Movies, go back and listen to our Commando episode. We have the same complaint. We are just a podcast that talks about Claymore mines way too much, but they don't make big fireballs that blow up warehouses. These are anti-personnel. It's just lots of high-speed metal shit flying at you.
Well, there is that grenade that's on the side of the house as well. There's more than one tripwire.
That's true.
Yeah, and it's just so people don't point out, it's also used against unarmored vehicles. So everyone who's out there, if you've seen, what was it, Swordfish, what a larger explosive can do when you have some ball bearings, I wouldn't be surprised if Roland's not shot, but he's hit by one of these ball bearings. That's going to fuck up all those cops.
I like that you refer to Swordfish like it was Jurassic Park. Like,
what?
Swordfish, the movie everybody's seen.
I'm showing my age. Have you seen it?
American cinematic classic, Swordfish. Fuck no.
You've never seen Swordfish with Travolta?
I've never seen Swordfish.
Really?
Really?
What is it called? Like Operation Swordfish, or what was it called?
No, it is Swordfish. We're familiar with it. We just didn't watch it.
It's Halle Berry. You got Wolverine. You got Travolta. It was good.
You're not selling me on this.
What year was it? Let me see now. I might commission this one for Shat the Movies. Oh, damn, it's 2001. Come on, Hugh Jackman. You can't picture him as a hacker? It's glorious.
Listen, I hope you can hear in my voice the amount of disappointment I have about the fact that we can't cover this because it came out in 2001. I am crestfallen. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your voicemails, emails, and tweets. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV True Detective. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. Facebook, you can search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com, where you can read all of these emails in their entirety. Our email address is host@shatontv.com. Go ahead and write us your thoughts for next week's The Watch. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, the King B, Roger Roper, and Carrie Gross, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next Tuesday, where we find out what happens to the trash man, Brett Woodard.
No, Jonathan.
Yeah, no, that's
okay. Go. It's on you.
Sorry.
Okay.
It was that's a
Jesus Christ.
Go ahead.